I think most of you know us, but we are a leading OEM supplier for smart battery systems for over 35 years. We don't only do downhole batteries, we do batteries across a wide industry range, and including lithium ion and other custom types of batteries. So we do specialize in demanding high temperature requirements. That's why we do a lot in the oil field, but that's kind of what Excell Battery does at this point. I think that brings us to the end, and I see some questions pop up, so we'll try to answer some of these. So I'm going to ask Mike to answer this first one because I'm asked this all the time, and especially in the high temp environment, people ask, are lithium ion rechargeable batteries available for high temperature? Mike, can you talk about that?
Sure, yeah. At these specific temperatures, generally, no. There are some kind of very specialty cells that can operate up to about 85 C or so, but above that point, really, it's all primary.
Okay, thanks. And Craig, maybe I'll throw this one at you. We've heard in the past some cells available of lithium CFX. Are there anything available at this point? Do you know of anybody making CFX cells?
Yeah, there are certainly CFX cells available. Certainly, Engineered Power has a viable cell these days, and it's a fairly robust chemistry. Doesn't generally hit the extreme high temperatures, but it's good in that middle zone.
Thanks, Greg. Here's one. What is the max temp I can run a 180-degree battery? Well, the answer is very simple, 180 degree. The temperature rating of the battery is determining the max temperature that a battery can run at. And I think the same person asked, is there a safety margin I could exceed 180 C or 200 C batteries? Well, of course, the answer is no. The max temp that you could run a battery without causing a problem is the temperature rating of the battery. There are no safety margins above that. Mike, how about answering what is the best temperature for depassivation?
It's really a function of what's most practical. Room temperature, slightly above room temperature is really where most people do it, 25 C or above. Below that, the cells are much less active and it'll be a whole lot less effective.
A related question was, why do lithium thionyl not work at low temperatures? And what is the lowest temperature lithium thionyl operates at?
That is more a function of discharge rate than anything. They do continue to operate at low temperatures, just at greatly reduced rates, like say from 0 to room temperature, the amount of current you can pull from it is about half. And then, going up again from room temperature to say 70 C, it's another doubling of available current.
Thanks, Mike. Craig, can you answer, I know we showed it before, but can you remind people who the cell suppliers are for high temperature cells?
Yeah, the most usual suspects that are out there are going to be your Electrochem, your Engineered Power, Vitracell, and and Tracer are the main ones that are producing the very robust high temperature cells.
I have a question here. Goes back to the exposed contents of water question. But what happens to the battery when water hits it? In MWD tools, while drilling, it interacts with a lot of things, including water. Well, as I mentioned, batteries are sealed. The cells are hermetically sealed in stainless steel casings. The cells are also encapsulated inside a fiberglass tube. So water by itself with an intact battery is not a safety hazard. It could cause water damage to the materials, but as far as interacting with lithium, which is very reactive to water, it'll catch on fire. Lithium is not exposed in a normal situation. If the battery explodes downhole and the cells are open, well, that's a different story. Drilling mud, water could react with any lithium that's left over, but hopefully that is all occurring downhole, so people aren't around it at that point. The question that I'm asked a lot is, how long does your battery last? Mike, can you explain why saying hours is not a good answer to that?
Sure, yeah. The amount of time the battery lasts or will last is a function of the available energy within that cell. So since energy is current over time, talking only about the time side of it doesn't give us the full picture. It's more a function of available capacity and the amount of current you're pulling from the battery. You can pull, a fixed number of amps for that many hours from a pack before it's depleted.
Thanks, Mike. Long as you talk about depassivation, how many cycles can I depassivate the battery?
You can essentially depassivate it until the entire capacity of the battery is used. There's really no harm in depassivating it a second or third time. You're just wasting energy.
Craig, if I want to design a battery pack or a high temperature battery pack, what should I consider?
Well, obviously, the temperature range you're going to be operating in is around the high temperature stuff is going to be your key consideration. From there, we need an energy budget. What kind of capacity are you going to require? Voltage makes a lot of sense. What kind of voltage is your circuit going to want to see? And then what kind of current do we need to draw? Are we going to be running constant current? Or are we going to be running pulse current? Because pulse current can often work okay in a moderate rate with some sort of capacitor or something to handle those pulses, taking up less real estate of non-reactive materials. So you really want to be able to pair up the cell to your application, and that kind of gets to the heart of your question. So it's all around temperature, current, your current profile, and kind of what energy budget do you need to hit, as well as how long are you going to be deployed for. There are applications where people want to go and have very low draw things for many months. And at elevated temperatures, we can see things like self-discharge and stuff start to increase. So there's a lot of things. So generally, if you want to design something for a high temperature application, it's definitely worthwhile coming in and consulting with us, and we just get all those details out on the table so that we can guide you in the best direction.
Thanks, Greg. As long as you're on there, I have two kind of related questions here. What do I do with a battery once it's used? How do I dispose of it? And are these batteries recyclable? Are components reused in new batteries or other products?
Right. It is required by law that we recycle these batteries. There are really two methods, and it often depends on the technologies available in the part of the world that you're in. There is pure recycling, and then there is essentially making these batteries inert. So both are fairly good things to do. Making them inert, once exposed and properly processed, the contents of these things are offer very little risk to the environment. They're not much more of an issue than salt and a few minor gases that we can deal with. But they will reuse the material in many cases. It just depends if the processing facilities that are available in that part of the world are going to be able to do that.
Thanks, Greg. Got a couple of questions kind of related to a gauge. One, would we be able to get a gauge that measures amp hours? Well, the answer is yes. Gauges, ours included, and others, I have to say, they determine how much capacity you use by telling you how many amp hours were used. And that answers another question, like how do I know what capacity is left in the battery? Well, the only accurate way of doing it is by using a gauge to measure how much amp hour capacity has been used. As I mentioned previously, you cannot measure capacity used or how much is left in the battery by just measuring voltage. There's two questions that I see on self-discharge. Mike, can you talk about self-discharge at room temperature? How much does a battery lose just sitting on the shelf?
Not a ton. We're talking, in the single digit percentages per month type range. And, it's slightly higher as the temperature goes up, but the kind of the passivation mechanism really prevents the cell from self-discharging at a particularly high rate.
And maybe kind of related, if you run a battery a couple times, how much life will be lost by running it?
So running it and not using it, I think, is maybe the
Right.
intent there. So if it was in a, say, a backup position, or the second stave in a tool, not a lot. It'll mostly be a function of how much current is being pulled from the battery. Even if it's in backup duty, there's some small load on it, and that will be larger than the self-discharge rate of the cells themselves.
Sorry, Mike, I'm gonna pick on you on this depassivation. Sometimes after I've done the depassivation to a battery, when it reaches the rig site after a week or so, it doesn't power the tool. Can you explain why that's happening?
That is just that passivation layer reforming. So after the discharge is stopped, that layer will reform, and a week is probably about enough, especially if the tool has a particularly high pulse current on startup. The ability to supply that pulse while passivated may be a problem.
Thanks, Mike. Craig, do we have a recycling program for our customers? And do we have recycling in Western Canada or Canada in general?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we do when a customer requests it. We do certainly offer recycling. It's recycling is something that does take sort of net inputs on these primary cells, so it does cost. So there's an element to that, but generally in most applications we essentially roll that into the cost of the battery packs. As far as Western Canada, there's a very large facility that a lot of these applications go to. It's probably one of the largest in North America. It's in Trail, BC, called Retrieve Technologies. So I've certainly toured that plant a number of times, and it's quite impressive.
There's a question here. Can I transport batteries in my car? What's the risk? Well, there's a couple things here. Batteries are considered dangerous goods or hazmat for transportation by ground. So anytime you ship a battery, it must be properly packaged and paperwork for it. But there is a thing in the States called materials of trade, where you can transport a battery in your vehicle as long as it's in support of your job or whatever you're trying to do. You can't be the shipper, you can't be transported just for the sake of shipping, but you can transport batteries as a material of trade in your personal vehicle. Of course, there is a risk. They need to be packaged correctly. And you must know what's in your vehicle. A risk would be if something happens, if you have an accident or something like that, of course, but generally materials of trade allow you to transport batteries in your car in support of your job. In other words, you could take a battery to the rig site to do your job. I think we're running out of time and questions here, but you can find us through our website at excellbattery.com. And anyways, have a good day and thanks for attending, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.